Hi, I'm Whisperer, and I'll be giving this presentation on the status of the planets.new documentation. Joshua announced the start of the documentation project at the end of 2014. Before this project started, planets.new had 107 pages of documentation. Most of those pages were based on the T-host version of VGAP 3. There was no index for the documentation, and there was no local search capability. When Joshua started this project, he gave the editors a few general directives. We were to improve and add to the documentation. We were to remove the references to the shareware or registered VGAP software from the main documentation. This has been done. Documentation was to be created for both the beginner and the experienced player. We were to get permission to copy documentation from off-site sources. The editors have created a set of directives based on Joshua's directives. We have improved and added to the documentation and will continue to do so. We have addressed both the beginner and the experienced player and will continue to do so. We simplified this requirement from Joshua. As it turns out, when we tried to get permission from sites, most didn't respond. We believe this is due to a combination of the site contact information being out of date and the owners not being interested in sharing their data. We prioritize the changes we make based on what we believe the user impact will be. The user impact is defined as the number of users impacted combined with the severity of that impact. A change that significantly impacts only one user will have a low priority, while a change that lightly impacts all users will have a high priority. A simple fix, such as a typo, will usually get done more quickly than a complete rewrite of a page. The editors also created a set of policies intended to make the documentation as easy to use and maintain as possible. Many of these policies are a result of Dazjia's work at the beginning of the project. Opinion and belief have no place in the reference documentation. Information added to the reference documentation is known and verified. This is an extension of the first policy. This is a requirement for any well-structured documentation. We completed this task in July. This is a requirement for any documentation supported by a small group. When one piece of information is in multiple locations and needs to be changed, all of the locations need to be located and changed. By requiring that the information only be in one location, we increase the internal consistency of the documentation while minimizing maintenance time. This is an ongoing project. The editors have also created policies on what gets documented. We document the metagame. The metagame consists of all the actions that take place outside of the game. We document what is supposed to happen when an action is requested. We call this the normal process. When there's a known exception to the normal process, we document that exception. We will not and cannot mention every state or mission that has no effect on the normal process. Any such attempt would cause the documentation to become unmaintainable, which would quickly render it unusable. There are a few pages that describe a state or mission as having no effect on the normal process. This data will be removed as it's found. We realize that this could, at times, cause the documentation to be slightly confusing, but we believe that this is much preferable to having completely unusable documentation. We have clearly stated this policy in the documentation, along with the detailed reasons for it, to minimize any possible confusion. The documentation project has been going for 32 months. During that time, we've tripled the number of pages of documentation and made several other enhancements. We've removed the references to VGAP and T-host from the documentation, except for a few pages that describe the basic configuration and capabilities in a comparative manner. We have mostly completed the beginner documentation. Because of this, we'll be focusing on more advanced topics soon, unless there are changes to the system or we're informed that something else is needed. We create a new index from the documentation every day and compare it to the previous version. The difference is manually checked to verify that the change is good, and if so, the index page is updated. We check all links in the documentation every day. The search capability was provided and is maintained by Joshua. We've data mined the old games for the system-generated messages. We can search through this data, which makes finding specific events quick and easy. At this point, progress is much slower than it was at the start of the project. Our master wordsmith is concentrating on breathing life into many of the pages. A spell check was performed on all pages last year, causing over 150 pages to be updated. There are many corner cases in the planets.new software. These need to be tracked down and documented. In order to keep the pages understandable, some of these corner cases are saved for a future details page. These detail pages are quite complex and require a significant amount of research and verification. Campaign advantages require more advanced players. As we accumulate the required testing players, or as we see information from campaign players, this information will be made more complete. We have already completed several simple guides and will continue down this path. A mentor guide for MVM games has been on our list for quite some time. Shortly after we started this project, GNERF started the first of the documentation editor's threads. Any user could make a request for a correction or enhancement. Because all users could read the thread, requests for information were often answered by another user. Due to the activity in the threads, it was easy for information in them to become lost. Another problem with this system is that each user would receive all posts to the thread until they unsubscribed. This could cause problems with some email providers. As it turns out, the use of forum threads was easy to abuse. In fact, this system had to be abandoned due to the abuse of one specific user. We are finally announcing a replacement for the previous thread-based system. This system is based on the track ticketing system and includes a wiki for use by the editors. This new system uses tickets to track requests. As before, any user can make requests to the system. Unfortunately, the user community has no access to the list of tickets. To offset this new limitation, we have the ability to grant specific users read-only or even read-write access to the track database. We have not yet determined how to best use this ability and invite suggestions on this subject. Once a ticket is created, it will be permanent. It will not go away even after it's completed. When a ticket is updated, the user who submitted the request and all users who duplicated the request will be notified. This will result in less email being sent than from the previous system. We have a system in place to block abusive users. It's fairly easy to get on that list, and it's very difficult to get off it. We consider abuse of this public service to be a severe offense. Excessively abusive messages will be forwarded to the planets.new admins for possible action. To create a ticket on the documentation, it's as simple as sending a PM. Please keep the messages short while including all the relevant information. Requests that are not understood will be rejected and closed. When a ticket is updated, the reporting user will be notified. This allows the user to follow the progress of the ticket through the system. Update and status messages will come from the user editors in the form of a plain text message. The system doesn't send HTML at this time. The planets.new message system will be used for all communication, so there's no need to provide an email address to the new system. If you don't receive planets.new messages, you won't receive ticket update notices. The off-site system is private and secure. It may only be accessed by authorized individuals. We believe Joshua chose to focus his limited resources on the software and on supporting the user community. As of September of last year, the new ticketing system was available to the editors. A few users have already received messages from the ticketing system. Both Joshua and Big Beaver have full access to this ticketing system. Inactive editors and players wishing to become editors should contact GNERF or myself for access. While the above changes are a large step forward for the planets.new documentation team, they're only one step. We're working on several additional features to allow users greater interaction with and control of the tickets they generate. These features might not happen depending on the complexity of implementation. A user should be able to update tickets they create. They should also be able to close those tickets. A user should be able to see a report on the tickets they've created. A user should be able to control which tickets they receive notifications for. A user should be able to block all notifications from the ticketing system. Until we have an automatic system in place, this function can be done by submitting a ticket. As the next major step forward, we are working on a Git system for version control of the documentation. This system will override changes made on planets.new for documents tagged as production. This will significantly improve the editor's ability to see the detailed history of a specific file. Unlike the current editing system, Git allows multiple editors to work on the same file at the same time, while minimizing the chance of data loss. This has caused problems in the past. Editors will now be able to use modern tools to edit the documentation. This translates to less time spent to update a document. We will be able to automate some of the validation of documents, which should deliver a higher overall quality. Git is a distributed version control system. Each copy contains all the historical information that the main repository contains. There are several other projects that the editors have been working on. We have worked with Big Beaver to improve the race sheet. Updates to the HorWasp documentation are on hold until they become more stable. After the second alpha release, it became apparent that there were major changes coming for the HorWasp, and that the majority of time spent documenting that release would need to be repeated after the next release. We have broken the ability, advantage, and mission pages apart. This has simplified many of those pages, making them easier to understand. Several complex questions have been researched, mostly by Challenge Spaceyard. The VGAP differences document has had several new items added to it. Gnurf continues his work on the host order. There's now a details page for cloaking. We have verified the damage done by Glory devices and by the self-destruct feature of the Zilla-class battle carrier. There are also some projects that we're working on to benefit players who host games. I'm working with Gnurf to create a page containing the policies used by players for their custom games. This allows a host to just link to the document to describe their hosting policies. It also allows other hosting players to see what hosting policies are in use so they can better formulate their own. In addition, I have a service that informs hosts of player changes in their games. Finally, there are some projects that we're working on to benefit the scriptwriters. The API calls are being documented, mostly by Singularity. The add-ons page is being updated by Singularity. If you write scripts and would like to have them listed there, please send him a PM. I track changes to the client code. To receive a PM when the client is changed, please send me a PM. If there are any questions, please feel free to post in the announcement thread or send me a PM. Thank you very much for your time.